There's a version of Tom Selleck that lives inside people's minds quietly without them even realizing it's there. The broad shoulders, the easy, unhurried confidence. The kind of face that made strangers feel safe just by looking at it. For decades, he was the man America trusted, on screen, on television, inside living rooms every single week. He felt permanent somehow, solid. Like certain things in this world simply don't change no matter what else falls apart around them. But life has a way of rewriting the story slowly and silently when no one is paying attention. At 81, the man who once seemed untouchable is living a reality that almost none of his fans saw coming. Not a scandal, not a controversy, something far quieter than that, something that lands differently because it doesn't arrive with warning signs or dramatic headlines. It just comes. The way time always comes, without asking permission, without apologizing for what it brings. People who grew up watching him have been learning, piece by piece, what his life actually looks like now. And the reaction hasn't been outrage or gossip, it's been something softer than that, sadder. The kind of feeling that settles into your chest when you realize that someone you've admired your entire life is more human, more fragile, more real than you ever allowed yourself to believe. Some fans have said they couldn't finish reading about it. Others said it made them stop what they were doing and call someone they love. That's not the response you expect from a story about a famous actor, but Tom Selleck has never quite followed the script that everyone else wrote for him. That much, at least, hasn't changed. What has changed, and what it truly means, is worth sitting with quietly for a moment. Tom Selleck didn't become beloved by accident. That kind of deep, lasting affection, the kind that stretches across generations, that survives the rise and fall of trends. That makes grown people feel genuinely emotional just hearing someone's name that has to be earned. And it's earned slowly over years through consistency and character, and something that's almost impossible to fake no matter how good an actor you are. He was born in Detroit in 1945 and grew up in California during a time when the American dream still felt like something you could hold in your hands. His early years weren't glamorous. There was no shortcut, no lucky break handed to him at the door. He worked, he studied, he tried his hand at acting when the path wasn't clear and the outcome wasn't guaranteed. Small roles. Commercials, auditions that led nowhere, and rooms that stayed quiet after his name was called. The years before anyone knows your name are usually the ones that shape everything that comes after, and Selleck moved through them with a patience, a quiet steadiness. That would later become the defining quality of everything he did. Then came Magnum PI and everything shifted. When that show premiered in 1980, it didn't just make Tom Selleck a star, it made him a presence. There was something about the character he played, Thomas Magnum, a private investigator living in Hawaii with a kind of sun-warmed confidence and a deep, unshakable moral core that felt less like a performance and more like a window into who he actually was. Audiences sensed it. They responded to it the way people respond to things that feel genuinely true. The show ran for 8 years, and during those 8 years, Selleck became the kind of figure that families gathered around the television to experience together. That matters more than it sounds. Television in the 1980s was still a shared experience. You didn't watch it alone in the dark on a device you carried in your pocket. You watched it together in the living room with the people you loved, and whoever was on that screen became part of your household in a strange but very real way. Tom Selleck walked into millions of homes for nearly a decade. And people let him in willingly week after week without hesitation. He turned down Indiana Jones to honor his commitment to Magnum. That single decision tells you almost everything you need to know about who he is. He chose his word over his opportunity. He chose loyalty over career calculation. Harrison Ford took the role and the rest became history, but Selleck never appeared to carry bitterness about it. He just kept working, kept showing up. Kept being, as far as anyone could tell, exactly who he appeared to be. And that consistency, that quiet, steady, unglamorous consistency, became the thing people loved most about him. Not the fame. Not the looks, the feeling, deep and wordless, that here was a man who meant what he said. Which is exactly why what his life looks like now lands the way it does. Long before the world started paying attention to what celebrities do when they step away from the cameras, Tom Selleck was already doing something that most people in Hollywood never seriously attempt. He was building a real life. Not a curated one, not a brand, a life with all the weight and texture and ordinary difficulty that word actually carries. He married Jilly Mack in 1987, and by Hollywood standards, what followed was almost strange in its ordinariness. They stayed together. They raised a daughter, Hannah, who grew up largely outside the public eye, away from the glare and the noise. They put down roots on a ranch in Ventura County, California, a working ranch, not a trophy property. Not a status symbol, where Selleck grew avocados and found something that celebrity rarely provides and almost never preserves. Quiet, real, honest quiet. He talked about the ranch in interviews the way people talk about the place where they feel most like themselves. Not as an escape from his real life but as the very center of it. The work was physical and grounding, the pace was slow, the rewards were simple and solid. He could go outside and do something with his hands and feel the kind of tiredness that actually leads to rest. The good kind, the earned kind. The kind that celebrity and performance and applause can never quite replicate. So many people who reach the level of fame Selleck reached end up chasing the next thing, the next role, the next project, the next version of relevance that proves they're still here, still matter. Still visible. The entertainment industry rewards restlessness and feeds on it like oxygen. And yet Selleck seemed to make a conscious decision, at some point that's difficult to pinpoint exactly, that he already knew what mattered. And it wasn't more. His later career followed the same quiet logic. He returned to television with Blue Bloods in 2010, playing Frank Reagan, the steady patriarch of a New York City police family. The role fit him in a way that felt almost inevitable, almost designed. Here was an older man playing a figure of quiet authority, someone whose strength came not from aggression but from stillness. From a deep and unshakable sense of what he believed and what he was willing to stand for, no matter the cost. Fans connected with it immediately and deeply. For 12 seasons, he showed up to that set with the same professionalism, the same groundedness, the same quiet refusal to let ego enter the room ahead of him. The people who worked alongside him spoke about that experience in terms that didn't sound like normal Hollywood praise. They said he made everyone better, that he remembered everyone's name, that he treated every person on set, every single person, regardless of their role or their rank, with the same basic, genuine dignity. That's not a small thing. That is a choice made deliberately every single day across many years, and it created a life that looked, from the outside, like proof that you could do it right. That you could have the fame and the family and the integrity and the peace, that the whole thing didn't have to cost you what it cost so many others. Then Blue Bloods ended. The ranch faced serious financial strain, and things got harder in ways that no amount of dignity, no matter how deep and real, can fully protect a person from. Blue Bloods came to a close in 2024 after 14 seasons. By any measure, it was a remarkable run, one of the longest-running dramas in CBS history. But endings, even expected ones, even earned ones, carry weight that you don't always anticipate until they arrive, especially when a show has become more than just a job. When it has been a rhythm, a daily purpose, a reason to be somewhere meaningful alongside people you've genuinely come to love. Selleck had spent over a decade inhabiting Frank Reagan. That character, stoic, principled, quietly complicated, had woven itself into how the public understood and recognized Selleck himself. When the show ended, it wasn't simply a professional transition. It was the closing of a chapter that had gently, invisibly, defined the shape of his later years. And that kind of closing leaves a specific kind of silence behind it. That silence arrived alongside something else. Reports began to surface about financial difficulties connected to his ranch. The property, the place he had spoken about with such obvious and unguarded love. The place where he had chosen to build the most honest version of his life, had reportedly come under significant pressure. Water costs, operating expenses. The very real and very unglamorous burdens of maintaining land through years of drought and economic strain in California had become, according to reports, genuinely serious in ways that surprised even those who thought they understood his situation. There's an image most people carry about wealthy celebrities, that money exists for them in a completely different dimension, somewhere safely beyond the reach of ordinary worry and ordinary loss. But the reality is often far more fragile and far more human than that assumption ever allows. The ranch wasn't a symbol of excess, it was the thing he had chosen instead of excess. The deliberate, eyes-open alternative to the life he could have lived. Watching that come under pressure, even from the outside, even secondhand, even through the filtered language of news reports, feels different from a story about someone who spent carelessly or gambled recklessly. This was a man who had bet on simplicity, on roots, on something that actually meant something, and real things require real maintenance. That's the part no one tells you when you choose them. His daughter Hannah, who grew up on that land, spoke about what the ranch meant to their family in terms that went far beyond real estate or property value. It was memory. It was identity. It was the physical location, the actual soil and air, of everything they had built together away from cameras and attention and the exhausting performance of public life. The thought of that being threatened at 81, after a lifetime of doing things the right way, that's the detail that began reaching people in places that pure celebrity news rarely touches. There's a number that keeps appearing in conversations about Tom Selleck now. It carries more weight than numbers usually do. 81. It's not old in the way that some ages once seemed old. People live longer now. They stay sharper longer, remain present and engaged in ways that previous generations couldn't always manage. And yet 81 carries its own specific gravity, its own quiet pressure. It's the age at which the body begins negotiating different terms. The age at which mornings feel altered in ways that are hard to name. The age at which the distance between who you were and who you are becomes something you can actually see when you look in the mirror, not with horror, but with the clear, sober recognition of someone who has been paying attention. For someone who built so much of his identity and so much of the world's relationship with him, on physical presence, on vitality, on the kind of effortless, comfortable strength that reads so clearly through a camera lens, that negotiation takes on an additional and deeply personal dimension. Selleck has spoken honestly in recent years about what aging has required of him, the adjustments, the slowdowns. The moments where the body quietly reminds you that you are a guest within it, not its permanent owner. He hasn't dramatized it. That is not and has never been his nature. But he's been honest in the way that genuinely dignified people are honest, clearly, calmly, without fishing for sympathy or leaning into the performance of suffering. What fans have responded to in those moments isn't weakness. It's the opposite of weakness. It's the sight of someone carrying genuine difficulty with the same steady composure they've always projected, and understanding, perhaps for the first time, that the composure is costing him something, that it has always cost him something, that the steadiness they admired across all those years wasn't the absence of struggle. It was the daily, private decision to meet struggle without theater. He's also had to navigate the complicated and disorienting experience of watching an entire industry transform completely around him. The Hollywood he entered no longer exists in any recognizable form. The rhythms of television, the relationship between actors and audiences, the economics of production, the meaning of a career itself, all of it changed in some cases beyond recognition. Across the decades he worked, adapting to that transformation while managing the personal and financial pressures of later life, while grieving the loss of colleagues and contemporaries, that is not a simple story. That is a life accumulating its full and honest weight the way all real lives do, slowly and without ceremony. When stories about Tom Selleck's current situation began spreading online, the response that followed was something difficult to categorize using any of the usual tools. It wasn't the normal internet reaction to celebrity news. There was almost no mockery, very little detached irony. Instead, something that no one quite predicted, genuine and widespread tenderness. People who had watched him as children, who had grown up with Magnum P.I. playing in the background of their weekend evenings, found themselves writing things in comment sections that surprised even them. Memories surfaced not only of his performances, but of the specific times in their own lives when those performances were part of the texture of their days, the years those moments represented. The people they had watched with, who were no longer here to watch anything with anyone. That's the strange and powerful alchemy of long-term celebrity. The people who remain in the cultural conversation long enough stop being just themselves. They become attached to the feeling of specific eras. They become woven into private memory in ways that no one planned or predicted, ways that run far deeper than admiration. When something touches them, even something as quiet and human as the pressures of aging and financial difficulty, it touches all of that accumulated, stored feeling too. Several fans wrote that reading about Selleck made them think about their own fathers, their own grandfathers. Men of a similar generation who had worked hard all their lives, built something real with their hands and their years, and then faced the late-life reality that hard work doesn't always protect you from uncertainty. Men whose dignity was real and deep and genuine, but whose struggles were equally real, and who rarely had either the language or the permission to say so out loud. That connection between what Selleck is quietly experiencing and something far more personal, far more universal, is what explains the emotional intensity of the response. It was never really about fame. It was never really about celebrity at all. What's important to say clearly, because clarity matters here and because he would want it said this way, is that Tom Selleck is not broken. He is not defeated. The picture that emerges from everything that has been reported, everything that people close to him have carefully shared, is not a picture of collapse. It is a picture of endurance. He still wakes up on his ranch. He still tends to the land where he raised his daughter and built his marriage, and made the deliberate, clear-eyed choice to live a life that prioritized what lasts over what merely dazzles. He still carries himself with the same unhurried, unperformed authenticity that made people trust him across 5 decades of public life. But the context has shifted. The financial pressures, according to reports, are real. The physical realities of being 81 are real and undeniable. The professional landscape, without a long-running show to anchor his schedule and provide that daily sense of purpose and belonging, is genuinely different from what it was. And the people who love him, who have loved him for most of their lives, are watching all of this unfold and feeling something they don't quite have a word for yet. There are questions here without clean answers. What does the next chapter look like for a man like this? What does he want it to look like? How does someone who spent an entire life building things, a marriage, a family, a working ranch, a reputation built entirely on decency, navigate a moment when so much of what he built requires defending, requires protecting, requires a kind of effort that no one should have to face alone? No official conclusions have been reached on some of the practical questions surrounding his situation. And perhaps that unresolved quality is part of what makes the story sit so uncomfortably in people's minds. It doesn't resolve, it continues. The way real life always continues, without the tidy, satisfying ending that 8 seasons of television or a well-crafted film can offer. Life just keeps going, asking more of you than you expected, expecting you to keep meeting it. He is still here, he is still standing. That, when you really think about it, is not a small thing at all. There is a particular kind of sadness that comes not from tragedy but from time. Not from things going dramatically and visibly wrong, but from things simply accumulating. The years stacking up quietly when no one is watching. The world changing around a person who stayed consistent, who held the line, who kept showing up. The body gently but firmly reminding the mind of its limits. The things you built slowly revealing what they truly cost to maintain, to protect, to keep alive. Tom Selleck never asked for your pity, he wouldn't. That's not who he is, and it's not who he has been, not once, across all the decades you've known him. What he asked for implicitly, quietly, through every role and every interview and every account from the people who worked alongside him, was simply to be seen as he actually was. Not elevated into myth, not reduced to tabloid, not simplified into an image or a symbol, just seen. As a real person doing his best, the way everyone is doing their best, with whatever they were given. And maybe that's why this particular moment in his life, at 81, with all its complicated and quiet and utterly human difficulties, has landed so hard with so many people. Because they are finally seeing him, perhaps more clearly and more honestly than they ever have before. Not through the warm lens of Magnum's easy adventurousness or Frank Reagan's unshakable authority, but through the unfiltered, unscripted lens of a real man getting older in a world that keeps moving whether you're ready for it or not. The fans who say this story made them emotional aren't crying for a celebrity. They're crying for something the story reached inside them and found. They're crying for the fathers who worked hard and never complained, for the people they love who are quietly aging, for their own private, unspoken fear of what time does to the things and the people you have always counted on, for the slow, clarifying realization that dignity doesn't protect you from difficulty, it simply, profoundly changes how you face it. Tom Selleck has faced a great deal with extraordinary dignity. That has not changed. What has changed is that more people are finally paying close attention to what that costs, what it has always cost. And if there's anything worth carrying away from a story like this, one small, true thing, it might simply be this. The people in your life who seem the strongest, who show up the most consistently, who never ask for very much, they are carrying more than they let you see. They always have been. They always will be. Check on them. Tell them what they mean to you. Do it today. Do it before the chapter closes and the words you meant to say become the words you wish you had.